Yes! Whoop whoop! How is everybody doing? I'm doing great. Back from my days off. Had an amazing day today. I've been listening to this audiobook by Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath. Some really, really interesting insights in that about the civil rights movement. And a side of it that I hadn't heard of before, which I think is kind of a shame because, I don't know, like the stuff you hear about the civil rights movement, at least that I've heard, is always the, what's the word? It's uplifting and inspirational and, you know, kind of like these people were downtrodden and they overcame, and, you know, the sort of idea of this groundswell of movement. But Gladwell's approach is a lot more about the tactics that the protesters used. And it kind of ties into something that I was saying on the last podcast, or vlog or whatever, about sort of how you don't have to have a huge amount of people to create change. One of the most interesting stories to me was the fact that they were trying to get these protests together in Birmingham, and they could not, for the life of them, get enough marchers to start with because, you know, people were afraid. They were afraid they would lose their jobs if their bosses saw them marching, and obviously they could go to jail, and it's just not going to be a fun time if you're a black person marching in Birmingham for your rights. They aren't gonna take kindly to that. So he, I forget the guy's name. It wasn't Martin Luther King. It was one of his, you know, sort of subordinates. He got like 20 people, and that was all he could come up with. And he had like, you know, I mean, how much of a march can you have with 20 people? Not much. But one time, when he was getting started, they had some problems or something. They couldn't get started like they wanted to at 2 o'clock, and their march got delayed and delayed and delayed, and they ended up only being able to start at 4. Well, when they started at 4, because they were starting in a black neighborhood, a lot of these black people had gotten home from work, and they came out from their houses to see what was going on with this march. And the newspapers took pictures of all these black people standing in the streets and said, 1100 march in Birmingham. And made what was, you know, originally a tiny number of people, suddenly it looked like, oh, there's this huge groundswell of support, and freaked out the people who were, you know, in charge there, and really forced them to tip their hands in some other ways that, you know, the book goes into other stuff as well. But I'm just fascinated by that kind of, the type of sort of leadership and this makes it sound like a bad thing, but scheming in a way, the planning that had to go into making these things work. You know, Rosa Parks didn't just, and that's something I didn't realize until fairly recently, you know, you don't just show up and just sit on the, you know, sit in the white part of the bus because, right? Like, they had all of that planned out. There was one of the guys that would go to public libraries and that were, you know, white only, and specifically like tell his people, I'm gonna go get arrested. I'm gonna check out the biography of Robert E. Lee and get arrested for trying to use this white library. And like, you kind of get the glorification of the civil rights movement. Sort of seems like it glosses over a lot of that stuff. I want to see that. I would love to see a movie that like took it apart like House of Cards style and showed the, you know, the sort of the personalities behind it and the tactics. Maybe there is one that I haven't heard of it because I'm a super racist, but I'm not a super racist. People don't get our in-jokes from work, but anyway, Brentley says I'm racist because I'm willing to call people black. Man, have a debate about that. But yeah, I would love to see like sort of the dramatization of not just like we've overcome this great hardship, but like how they overcame it, the strategy, and maybe even both sides, you know, to get that tension involved of, you know, of planning and setting up the pieces and setting them in motion and trying one thing and it doesn't work and trying something else and like trying to sway public opinion. You know, you've got to, they're you know, these guys were not dumb. They weren't just out there, again, they weren't just out there just throwing, oh, we'll just march and see what happens. Like, they timed things, they were trying to get publicity, they were trying to make their attackers look as bad as possible. You know, because they knew it was all about sort of the public opinion. I want to see that. I want somebody to make a movie that gets into the nitty-gritty of that, because that is fascinating to me. Like, leadership in all forms, but especially like when you're going up against incredible odds. Those things, I think, are more interesting to me as a person than the sort of like heartwarming. I mean, I like to have my heart warmed every once in a while, but sometimes I just like to, you know, see some people land some punches, you know, politically, of course, but yeah. Somebody tell that story. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell's telling it. I'm sure other people have told it. They didn't tell it to me, and I'm sad. It's a good story. And we're back. We were gone. And now we're here again. And do you know what happened while we were gone? Do you know what thing occurred in the time between then and now? Age of Ultron trailer. Avengers Part Deuce. Oh yeah. I got to see it on my lunch break, and we got back like to clock in, and I told the other guys, I was like, did you see the Age of Ultron trailer? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, I guess you're gonna have to wait, because now we have to go back to work, haha. Because that's how I get my kicks. It's an awesome trailer. We watched it, like, I watched it once on my lunch break because my phone is super slow and I had to wait for it to buffer like 8 times. Still totally worth it. Why are you rattling? That's better. Alright, anyway, so yeah, waited for it to buffer. Everything was good. Watched that one the one time, and then we saw it like 3 more times on our like last like little smoke break, even though I don't smoke. Like they just give us 15 minutes. And on like the nice like high def like curved screen phone that Cody has, the other guy I work with, who's really into this stuff. It's such a great trailer. James Spader, like, it's a little bit difficult for me to sort of differentiate between what he's doing, like just because I know his voice so well from The Blacklist. But man, that trailer is just like, ah. You get burned by trailers too, like, you get a little wary sometimes. This happens a lot with Transformers films. Like, it looks like it's gonna be the best movie ever, and even though I like the Transformers films, they're not the best movies ever. But fingers crossed. Marvel Studios have been doing great. Kevin Feige, head over there, making a lot of great decisions. Joss Whedon directing this one. He's been making great decisions. Great director, great script writer. There's a part of me that's like afraid to be as excited as I am, but I'm so stoked. I'm super excited. Like I want to hold back. I'm afraid to be this excited, but I can't stop myself. I know it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be awesome. That's all.